Hello and welcome back to part 2 of the Great Scottish Road Trip. This time we'll be taking a little meander from Oban up to Skye. If you've missed the first bit, I'll put a link up top so you can go and see the first part. This is the second of 3 parts. The last part will feature the Korang. So I'll show some shots and some video from there. But for this one, we will be leaving the puffins behind that you may have seen in part 1. Unfortunately, they're very cute, aren't they, really? And we will be heading up the west coast of Scotland, up the side of Lochs, up to Fort William, and then across, carrying on up to Invergarry, and then across to Loch Alsh. First thing to say is, if you haven't looked at the Visit Scotland website, I will put a link to it in the show notes or up here, or do something. They have some scenic routes which are really useful for location scouting, so you can kind of get an idea of what is on the way up and perhaps pick a few locations to go and pick. So we'll come on to that in a while, because there was a couple of locations that I spotted that I thought, ooh, I fancy going there. So as I say, I'll take you through this journey. Hopefully you'll enjoy the shots. Yeah, let's go. So the first part was driving Oban up to Loch Alsh. It's about a 2.5 hour drive, 3 hour drive, unless you stop a lot and take photos. Can't say that I did that well, maybe I did do that. You head up the side of Lochs, I think that's how you say it, and kind of go past the base of Ben Nevis. And the first place that I really wanted to stop actually was Castle Stalker, which isn't my nickname, or my job description either. But it's a castle that you can find not that far, maybe 15 miles north of Oban, at Appin. There's a good viewpoint that overlooks it. We were there on a really sunny day, and actually a lot of the shots you're going to see today are bright blue skies, because we had 25 degrees, bright blue skies, correct, almost every day, which means that if you're looking for dramatic kind of clouds and breaks in the sky, unfortunately this time you're not going to see that. Maybe when you go you'll have more luck, is the wrong word, because we didn't get rained on, we didn't get snowed on, and we didn't have any midges, so I'll take that as a win. But Castle Stalker, it's just sat on a little island just off I was going to say the coast, and I guess that is off the coast. But I thought it was a really nice little location. You can see here there is a cafe, and you kind of walk down to a viewpoint overlooking it. I do think actually it would probably shoot better, and if I've had the time, to actually go down to the Loch side. But to be quite honest, so this is handheld HiRes, and a lot of these shots will be. I got into the flow of kind of using that a lot more. 12 to 100 on my EM1 Mark III, f6.3, ISO 200 and 44mm, and just shot away. I say it's a very bright day, so again on this video I think a lot of the shots are going to be black and white, just to try and draw out the contrast in the scene in a much more dramatic way than I can with the colour. But as I say, that was kind of the first real gateway to the Highlands as we went, and that was really, really nice. I could have spent a lot more time there, but literally we had a cup of coffee, shot a few scenes, and then carried on to go and have lunch on another loch side. But as you drive up, you will go past Ben Nevis as you come up to Fort William, and just by as you go past there, you'll come to the Commando Memorial, which is there for British commandos, the first commando force, if I get this right, from the Second World War. They did a lot of their training up in the Highlands and around Nevis, and there's a memorial there. So keep driving, another couple of hours, and we end up at Loch Alsh. What I'll do now is we'll flick over to me in the past, talking to you in the present about a shot I'm going to take in the past. I think that works. This is my first composition. It's actually at the top of the garden. If I spin you round, what you can see is this is where we're staying, and I can just spin you around and you can see the house, which is very exciting. I know everybody likes a house and a washing line, me especially. But what we're going to do is we're going to look straight up towards the start of the Five Sisters, which you can see across the loch. What you can't see is Eilean Donan, the castle, which I will go and get some shots of. Probably evening shots, but as I say, the sun is still, well, in fairness, it barely gets dark here. I think the sun set last night about 10:15, which is, well, for us southerners, is quite late, you know. But I'm going to set it up. So I'm going to do, I've got the 12-100 on. I'm going to do handheld HiRes. And I'm going to try and do it about f5.6, and we'll see what the shutter speed comes out at. With a polarizer, just take some of the glare off, and a graduated ND just to lighten some of the sky, darken some of the sky. So what I'll do is I'll try and set this up so you can see kind of, I come this way. Oh look, you can see straight over my shoulder. And I'm at about 45mm, so 90mm equivalent. Line it up. I've got the, if I take you inside the camera, you can kind of see the view I'm looking at. What you can play is you can play with the layers. So you got, if we just angle it up, you can see we can kind of lock the image with the island, and then you've got the various slopes coming down that give you a nice look across. And there we go. So I think the first thing to say is that I really liked Loch Alsh, and I really liked where we stayed, which was about 6 miles from the Kyle of Loch Alsh, kind of in between Dorney and the Kyle. We had a house right by the loch. It worked really well. And being able just to shoot down the loch, as you've kind of seen in the video, made for some lovely compositions. And I think the important thing was the layers, the interlocking land. You can't always get perfect conditions, and you can go out at sunrise, you can go out at sunset, and it's still, the light is what the light does. But what I want to talk about is just the shot. I think you saw it in the last video, from by the washing line. Very, very, top-notch location by a washing line. But what we can do, because it was so bright, is we can flick it into black and white, and you can kind of start to see the differences that we can make between the two by flicking between them. Virtually the same composition, but just being able to highlight the boat because it was white and make that a feature, but also bring out the contrast in the rocks and on the Monroes. I think adds something. So I quite like that as just a nice little placeholder image for my holiday, because remember, this is my summer holiday. And then just finally, we're able to get down to the loch side, so being able to position some rocks from the loch side, and then fire up the loch towards the Munros again, Ireland, layers, and it's all good. The next location I want to talk about was actually in the Kyle of Loch Alsh, and that's the Skye Bridge. Now, Skye Bridge has been open for about 20 years. It used to be a toll road, I think, toll bridge. But what I did was I found there was a lookout that overlooks the bridge. You can get to it in Kyle. You can drive up through a housing estate and you come out on this lookout. And if you go right to the top, you get a nice view over the bridge and over towards Skye and the Inner Sound. So I've done a few panoramas, and what I'm hoping that will happen now is that mysteriously they will appear on screen and we'll pan across them as soon as I work out how to do that in Resolve. This was sunset. I went up about 10 o'clock at night because the sunsets, well, actually it doesn't really get dark up there. But just, I've gone up to the lookout. You can see Skye going out across the Inner Sound. You've got the road and the bridge kind of curving off to the left, actually going out of the picture, but there's no other way to get them to kind of come into the picture from this location. But the high cloud meant that we got a little bit of glow that I was able to capture and actually bring out. And I haven't done very much to these apart from to stitch them and just to lighten the road ever so slightly so you can actually see that the road and the bridge are there. But otherwise, these are not far off how they came out of the camera. And for that, I'm really, really pleased. But for a location, if you're passing through and you're prepared to be there at sunset, you can get some really nice shots. Actually, I think if you're there in the winter, you probably can get some really good shots of potentially the aurora up there. And I know that speaking to some of the locals, they were saying that certainly you can get the aurora up in Skye kind of reasonably regularly if you're paying attention to the conditions. As a location for sunsets, and just the story of the bridge and looking across those hills over at Skye, I mean, I could have spent hours sat there. It was beautiful. One of the first locations that we actually went to on Skye is Elgol. Elgol is down the end of a dead-end road. You just drive for ever and a day. The first shot I want to show you is actually, I can't even say the loch's name. I'm not going to embarrass myself by doing it. It's called the Hairy Loch, because the loch is just full of what I guess is bulrushes. Now, they're not quite ready this year yet. However, you can kind of see that you've got this fantastic background of these hills with these rushes in the lake and a loch, sorry, on a still day with a dramatic sunset or just with the cloud. I think you get a lovely shot. But I just want to flag this as you can't miss it as you go down the road. It just appears after about 5 miles. So if you're going to Elgol, set time aside to take a shot of the loch, the Hairy Loch. When you get to Elgol, we'll cut some film of that now. Once you're actually at Elgol, one of the reasons for going to Elgol is it's quite westerly. You can take boat trips round to, I can't think of the name of the loch now, you'll have to look on a map. They do boat trips to one of the lochs that you can't actually reach very easily by foot and certainly not by vehicle. So that's worth going to if you have the time. We didn't have the time, but I was able to get a few shots of the coastline there and looking across. And actually one of the best shots, I think some of the best shots I got are actually of the, as you walk down the kind of from the harbour, you can walk down the beach and round the headland. And I strongly recommend that because you start, I think it's limestone starts to have this honeycomb pattern. And it's fascinating. I think if you like abstract photography or you do landscape photography and like doing a bit of abstract, I think this would be an absolute goldmine for those who are massively into that abstract. The shapes were amazing, and to be honest, I set this up with the 8-25mm, again 5.6, and just tried to get in reasonably tight to some of the shapes and just capture some of the light and the shadow within them, and just kind of look at kind of some of these fascinating, I mean, you would have thought it was a beehive, but if I tell you that most of these are kind of about that big, most of these little pockets or shapes, you can start to understand it's a much bigger feature. And I don't know if it's unique, but it's, if you're passing, which is unlikely because you'd have to drive there, it's certainly worth a stopover. So we did Elgol, and then from there we went up to Talisker Bay. This was a bit of a last minute thing. We had gone to go to the Fairy Glen, but I went to go and then found that it was about 4 in the afternoon. They wanted £5 for parking, and my general reaction as a sort of Yorkshireman was, bugger that for a game of soldiers, not paying £5 to park. So we went to Talisker Bay, and you walk for about 25 minutes to get to the actual beach, down a farm track. And as you pop up to the beach, it's just covered in these black rocks and the black sand. And I don't remember ever being on a beach that was black. I know I've seen the Nigel Dansons and so forth on the beach in Iceland with these black beaches, but I haven't seen one before. And it was awesome. The black and the white sand, and the tide was just coming in and washing out. And this was a place that I could really put Live ND to action to get the shots, just trying to get the water, the movement in the water around pieces of seaweed or a stone on the beach, and it was just brilliant. But just being able to sit and have a paddle and just walk up and down the beach, just taking photos of the tide, how the beach changes as you're stood there, and the water is rushing over your feet, was brilliant. I think actually one of my favourite is this little bit of seaweed that I found. It's shot at 18mm. I just shot on the beach, Live ND, most of the time apart from this one which has no water, with the 8-25, just set to 5.6, and it was just the way that the sand, the black sand, kind of creates this shape around the seaweed, and you can kind of see how the water is drained away. It's perhaps slightly more minimalist compared to what I normally do, but I liked it, and as I say, I really enjoyed being on the beach, and I quite liked as well being able to play with the Live ND, as I said, and here are a couple of shots just to show you what you can kind of do with Live ND. Half a second, just putting on Live ND 16 maybe, and just keeping the camera still while you're stood in the waves, and just getting the water draining out and trying to look for those patterns in the sand as the water takes everything away. Yeah, if you have one of the Olympus, I think it's only the 1X and the Mark III that actually have Live ND. For things like this, give it a go. Or if you haven't, bung an ND filter on that gets you to about half to 1 second, and just shoot away, walk up and down with your paddle. There's nothing wrong with paddling. But yeah, Talisker Bay, lovely, absolutely beautiful. One of the final locations I want to talk about is was only about 10 minutes from where we were staying. Eilean Donan, I think is how you say it. Some of you of an age similar to me will recognise it from the film about people who don't die, in which a Frenchman plays a Scotsman plays a Spanishman, And Queen do the soundtrack, that's right. It's the castle from Highlander. There can be only one. I went down, we passed it on the way up, but I went down after the sun had gone down. It went in blue hour because the castle is actually lit after sun goes down. And you can park right next to the bakery in Dorney, which I haven't tried, but I reckon is probably quite nice. And yeah, you can go and set up. There was 3 or 4 photographers when I popped down. I was shooting handheld, they were shooting on tripods, but I think they all had DSLRs, but I was obviously kicking off on the mirrorless. So I've picked a couple of shots. I'm going to morph through them. The first one is quite tight at 44mm, quarter of a second. As I say, live ND just to smooth the water out. Yeah, and then I've just, for this particular shot, what I've done is I've just slightly brought the shadows up on the castle and just added some luminance and bumped the oranges up so it actually lights the castle up in the way that I saw. But the composition I probably prefer is actually the one where I pulled out to 25mm, just to give it a bit of context. You can see the light is just lighting the hills up just ever so slightly, and the clouds were sitting quite low, so although they're above the water, they were probably only at maybe 300 feet. So you just had these kind of clouds just sat there. And no, if you're passing late at night, quite why you'd be passing there late at night, I really don't know. Another good location. Quite why Sean Connery played a Spanish Scotsman, because let's face it, foreign accents were not Sean Connery's strong point. But I do like Highlander, and I do like the soundtrack because Queen, you know, just absolute rock. And that is this part of the trip. I'm going to leave you with a couple of shots that I was able to get at the house when we had a couple of days of kind of the cloud coming in, low cloud, a bit of cloud hanging around the hills, and just using some filters just to slow everything down and blur some of those clouds and pick out some of the hills. Munros. So I'm just looking at it on the screen before I tell you about it. And on this particular day, the tide had actually gone out, so you can see that the island is isolated. And when I spoke about it in the first video, being able to walk to it, this is how you could walk to it. You just put your trainers on and no socks and just walk across. But I just quite like the cloud on the hills being just smoothed out, but in the background you've got these cumulus clouds rising up above the Munros, and again you can see the interlocking nature of the Loch coast. But I have to say, I can really recommend this area. I think I said it in the first video, it's like shooting fish in a barrel in terms of photography. You can't go around a corner without going, that's a competition I want to capture, that's a competition I want to capture, composition I want to capture, that's a composition I want to capture. If you haven't been to Skye or up to that area, go. And I don't think it really matters what time of year you go, because you're just going to have a lovely old time taking photos. So yeah, so I hope you've enjoyed this. I'll be back in part 3 to talk about the Quorang and taking my wife for a walk that she didn't enjoy part of, and I'll explain why in that video. But for now, thanks for joining. Have a lovely time, stay safe, don't do what I do, which I don't know what that is, but just don't do it. And I'll catch you next time. Cheers for now.